This is the vlog for July 13th, a Friday. And if you couldn't tell from the thumbnail, it's been a bit warm today. It hasn't felt as bad as yesterday did, although I thankfully spent a lot of yesterday in air conditioned areas, so I didn't have to deal with it nearly as much as I might have if I had stayed home all day. Um, I also got out quite a bit today. I don't have them handy, but so let me step back a second here. I had to go fill out paperwork for work today, and I am accustomed to having to spend an hour just reading forms and signing my name on all of them. So it was a bit of a surprise today when I was handed a small folder with about 4 forms that I had to sign, and then handed it back, and then they gave me the thing I needed to do for a drug test, and that was it. It was wonderful. Now, it's probably because yesterday I spent an hour online putting electronic signatures on a bunch of forms that I read. And that probably took more than an hour, honestly. There's a lot of stuff that you have to go through, and we have to go through it every time we come back to a new contract. But, it's worth it. I've been gainfully employed with this company for 13 years-ish. So, I went in today at 10 o'clock, and I was done before 10:45. In fact, the only reason it took that long is that their printer jammed, and they couldn't print out the form that they needed to give me for the drug test. So, cool. I was left going, well, what do I do now? Well, it's about lunchtime, so I went and got lunch. And then after I finished, I realized I was in the area of Uncle's Games. So I stopped in, and they restocked a whole line of Nolzur's master miniature, something that sounds like one of the old books of D&D, like Volo's Guide to Monsters, or Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, or Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It's one of those types of names. But I was a little hesitant because they're made by WizKids, which is a company that I worked for quite a long time ago. And I left that company in sort of a sour place, along with all of my fellow coworkers who all quit the store that we all worked at under WizKids. And so I've tried not to support any of their stuff, although technically the company was sold by the original creator, who was the chief guy we had a problem with, and then possibly even sold again after that. So it's really not even the same company that I used to work for. But they make miniatures now for Dungeons and Dragons that are incredibly affordable. So when I worked at a game store, when I worked in the WizKids store back in 2002 to 2004, we had a lot of miniatures for sale. We worked for a company that made miniatures, but they were blind packed collectible miniatures. You didn't know what you were going to get in a pack. They first had Mage Knight, and then the much more successful HeroClix. They had a Battletech Mech Warrior line of giant robots that didn't work nearly as well as the other two. So I knew that they knew miniatures, but the miniatures always seemed very dubious in quality. It was due to the fact that the paint that was being applied to the miniature actually melted with the plastic of the mini itself, which left a lot of goopy looking ridiculous faces that were just sort of not very good. They later tried to appease a lot of our desire for higher quality miniatures by releasing a line of pewter figures that were not collectible and didn't have the little clicky base that you could paint yourself. But they were very expensive. You ended up having to pay roughly the cost, sometimes more than a pack of 4 figures for a single figure that didn't have the base on it that you needed to play the game. So, whatever. After WizKids was sold to, I want to say, Topps, um, Wizards of the Coast, in the midst of its 3.5 edition massive popularity for D&D in the mid 2000s, started releasing their own version of collectible miniatures, which were all, basically Dungeons and Dragons creatures or heroes. And it was a really cool concept, and the figures were much higher quality than what WizKids had been putting out at that point. I don't know what they did differently with their painting thing, but they were comparable in price. They didn't have the clicky base. You had to, play D&D or know the rules to their own version of a game that was sort of skirmish based and not full adventures in D&D. So I knew that WotC had good miniatures, but that collectible line sort of faded out. I can't remember. I still see Dungeons and Dragons figure packs, blind packs, but the price seems a little steep. Like a bigger box with like one guaranteed big critter and then like 3 or 4 other smaller things is like between $15 and $20, I want to say. I just looked at it and went, I'm not going to pay that much money. So imagine my surprise when the Nolzur's miniature line at Uncle's Games down at Redmond Town Center was restocked today, and I found a pack of goblins, 3 goblins, for $5. Knowing what you're going to get in a pack, and with goblins you want as many as you can get, basically, because you can generally throw a dozen at a group of adventurers and not have to worry about it, and it's fun for everybody. Well, except if you're the one keeping track of all the goblins. But it's still cool to see the heroes wiping the floor with them. So, stuff like skeletons, zombies, orcs, well, not in my setting, but all sorts of sort of menial fodder that you use to pad encounters and make them cooler looking while not actually adding too much to the danger. Those were the place where those collectible miniatures could fail, because you never knew how many goblins you were going to get in a pack. You might buy 5 packs and get 3 goblins. Well, what if you want a dozen goblins for an encounter, because that's fun? Then you're screwed, because you have to trade with other people, but they're not having any better luck with goblins, and they probably want a bunch of cheap fodder for their game. So, being able to buy a pack for $5 in this economy that is guaranteed to have 3 goblins inside is just super useful. And they're not even the only, they have packs of 3 kobolds as well. When you get up to skeletons and zombies, it gets a little dicier, because you only get 2 per pack for $5, but you're still getting 1 miniature for $2.50, which is a fantastic deal, like I said, in this economy. And I just found out that another company, Reaper, has a line that they call the Reaper Bones line, which is a line of miniatures made from a cheaper material that's very easy for them to mass produce, and you can get a pack of like 6 skeletons for $6. This is just great. That's exactly what you need. You want, you don't need a lot of detail on a skeleton to begin with. And if you're just trying to like improve the numbers in an encounter, that's the perfect way to do it. You can do all sorts of things, like if you really want to, buy a whole bunch and then take a third of them and paint them red and call them blood bones, which are a very common enemy in a lot of Japanese RPGs, and can add color, literally, to an encounter with skeletons. There's a lot you can do with this sort of setup, and I'm excited to explore the possibilities without breaking my budget. But a couple things, I ordered this yesterday. I went actually down to Bartell's to see if they had any sort of like binders or trapper keepers, I think is what we called them when I was in school, that I could use to keep track of all my notes as a DM, which was some of the things Matt Mercer recommended in his DMing tips. The thing is, this is a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. In fact, I can fit my laptop, which I'm using right now, so I'm not going to show that. I can fit my laptop in this thing, which is cool, except that I can't actually fit it in my bag. This is my satchel. I like to call it my purse. It's banging against the lamppost right now. And it's sort of hard to show on camera, but basically it looks like it's going to fit, and then when you try and like slide it in, well, now I'm having a little bit better luck. Oh, yeah, but it won't go. Yeah, won't go all the way down. So this is going to be one of those either or things. But I think overall this might work better than my bag for something like Dungeon. Well, for going to work, definitely having less to carry could be a big benefit. So that's something to consider. But I think for DMing, it's actually going to be handy to have both. I'll carry this in my hand, I'll put the bag strap on my shoulder, and I'm just driving to places anyway, so it's not a big deal. I could keep a whole bunch of miniatures in the bag. I could keep a book or two, or a smaller set of notes. Well, I could keep a lot of notes in here, honestly. But it's not a disaster that it doesn't fit in the bag. A little bit pricey. It was $20. Oh, and because there was a deal of pay $35 and get a whole bunch of get free shipping in one day, I ordered what I thought was a pad of paper. I should have considered that when it was $10 it would be something more than just a pad. But it wasn't until the box arrived and it was much heavier than I expected it to be that I realized I had not just ordered a pad of paper, I ordered 10. And of course that makes sense in hindsight. You spend $10 on paper, you're going to get, if you buy a legal pad, you're going to get a pad for $1 because it's just paper, whatever. So I've also got a couple more things coming in the mail, and I actually bought them twice. I ordered stand-ups. Basically, they're little board game or tabletop things that hold a single card, and you can put whatever you want on the card, which a lot of people put their character portraits on. So now they know where their character is in relation to, the enemies, and they can have, a very pretty picture of their character that is unique to their character without having to try and, make a miniature look like their character, which can be very tricky even with paint. And it's, yet another way to sort of pad encounters with multiple critters if you don't have all the miniatures for them. Miniatures are going to be better because they're three-dimensional and they have that tactile, thing where when you're moving them around, they feel like a little toy. Touch is very important in that situation. But on a budget, stand-ups are a fantastic option. One that I had not considered until recently when it was recommended to me by my friends. So now I just have to wait 3 weeks for everybody's schedule to clear up so that we can actually play. Or we're going to end up doing it on like a Wednesday night. We'll see how that goes. Well, I've gone well over 10 minutes again, so I'm just going to say I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.